Right, today's video, the crown. The silver crown, where it began. I wish I could have an original, like dating back to when these first began. Alas, I've yet to find one. Well, not in the budget that I can afford anyway. Basically, we're going to be talking about the crown and the history of the crown today, and how it was superseded by the £5 coin. Now, things began back in 1526 under Henry VIII, but these crowns weren't silver then. These crowns were actually gold. So if you search among your collection and you find you've got one of those, that is going to be worth a pretty penny. Please do let me know what your oldest crown is that you have. For me, this is the oldest crown I possess, which is dated 1696, as you can see just there. Now, I love this. To think that I'm actually got a physical grip on something that's over 300 years old, and somebody has had that in their hands. I mean, you could have bought a house back in them days with that. I mean, there'd have been places you could have bought the whole place for a crown. Never mind buy yourself a round of drinks. Probably paid your shopping for about 3 months. These are not very common to find. And then you look at, when I put that back, and then you look how things moved on. In 1851, in 1551, I'll get my teeth in and my dates right in a second. In 1551, we saw the introduction of the first silver coins that we know as a crown. I personally have never seen a gold crown dating back that far, but I would love to see one. So if you've got one, please put it in the comments below. I'd love to see it, just to see what they look like for comparison, if nothing else, in the flesh, so to speak. Now, when we can move on up the scale, after sort of 1551, they carried on with dates on them. And then in 1817, and then introduced in 1818, the crowns then became slightly, they were slightly different, because we had this great recoinage under George III. And that continued right the way through Queen Victoria's reign, until she died. And basically, things sort of come ground to a halt under Edward VII. Personally, though, I just love looking at these. And if you look at the writing, you can read the writing on the sides as well. And obviously, you've got what is the infamous St. George slaying the dragon. As you'll know, if you've got any gold sovereigns, this is the typical thing you see. This one's a bit of a worn example. But to be perfectly honest with you, to get something that is this old, it's over 200 years old, for God's sake, to get something like that in half decent condition is very, very difficult. This one's a little bit better. It's just a shame that it's got a little dink out the top there, which is a bit of a shame. I mean, because I think it's in superb condition, absolutely superb condition. But these weren't popular, these crowns, because of their sheer size. I mean, remember, you've got an ounce sitting there, you've got a traditional ounce, not a troy ounce, but you've got 28 grams, of silver coin there. Now, remember, anything that was made which was made prior to 1920, was 92.5% silver. Now, these were typically called Mother's Ruin. And why were they Mother's Ruin? Not because of the gin, as you all think, but because if you look at the double florin and you look at the size of the crown, you can actually see they're not that dissimilar. So in a dark pub, remember, we didn't have any electricity back then. So in a dark pub, these used to be often mistaken by barmaids for being a crown. And obviously, the easiest way to tell whether you've got a florin or a crown is just turn them over. Because if you look on the back, you can see these were only ever made with St. George and the dragon on the back, whereas the florin had the four shields. So like the four shields of the Union. So you can actually see they're quite different. But when you put them over the top of each other, they're not that dissimilar in size. And that is where the problems began, you know, like for a lot of barmaids. So when someone says to you, how comes people confuse the double florin with, you know, like a crown, now you know why. And that is a costly mistake, you know, back in those days, you know. Now for me, because the coin after Victoria died, because they come to an end, and then they started to become what is known as a commemorative coin. So when we get to for example, when we get to 1935, and we have what we call the rocking horse crown, and as you can see, these are so much more common, and I've got loads. I mean, this is just a sample of some of the ones that I picked up along the way. Most of the ones that I have are ridiculously high grade. They are ridiculously high grade. The reason being is that I just found that when I look at these, because they are common to come by, so it's probably the most common crown you're probably going to see. But if you look at this one, I mean, this I think should be graded actually. In fact, I think because I've got to go up to up to NGC. I'm going to have this one graded, I think, because it's just. I'm just going to bring this up to the camera so you can actually see this close up. Just what a great. Now there was a couple of versions of these. So if you've got one with the raised writing, now if you notice mine is ingressed into the coin, right, which is standard. Now I mean that was quite standard at the time. But if you've actually got one that is actually got the raised writing on there, you're looking at a coin that's worth probably somewhere in the region of about £1,500 upwards, especially if it's in this sort of condition. Now, for me, the easiest way to see whether you've actually got a good coin or a bad coin is, I'm not sure how clear this is going to come out on the camera, but I'm going to bring it right in and try and tilt it so that you can actually see. You can literally virtually count the hairs on his head. But if you look on his beard, because these are the very high points of the coin, this is typically where the coins get worn. Now, if you flip it over, you can actually see, when you've got a high grade coin, if you look on the towel, you can see that each individual strand that's on the towel, you can actually count those up. Now, when a coin has been in use for a few times, you know, like, because these were still circulated, but if these have been used, you'll notice how these pieces are missing, purely and simply because of the fact that the coin's high points get worn away as you give them, or they get used as currency. So if you've got anything like this, you know, I think it's worth having hold of, you know, never mind the fact that you've got such a great piece. And then you move on to 1937. Now this is a typical coin where you can see the difference between something that's very high grade like this one, because we can still see the hairs on his head. Whereas you look here, you see how worn that is? If you put the two side by side, and I'm just tilting them slightly so that you can see, but you can see how the hair goes on the head. The back of the coin's pretty decent. And I think that is purely and simply, you see that even this one, it's still 79 quid's worth, you know? Whereas you flip this one over, you've got 120 quid's worth. And that's because the coin is in such good condition. So it's like everything with coins. If you're a collector, you know, like, and you want the best, you pay for it. You know, you can get cheap coins. These you can't get so cheap anymore. You used to, but now with the way the price of silver has actually gone, I mean, and then, you know, you look at this one, look, there's another one, £119. But you look at the hair, you can even see, like, look, the layers of the hair where it hasn't been touched. These are very, very high grade coins. And then after that, we sort of, because they were sort of been phased out, really, for want of a better word, we didn't really see much until the Queen's Jubilee. And basically she ended up doing, you know, like coins like these, you know, like that were actually done. They were done to celebrate the coronation. I've got some upstairs, but I've got to apologise. I just wasn't climbing through the loft to go and dig one out because, unfortunately, these coins are just not worth any money, any great value. but they are just nice to have because of the fact they're historic value. Now, when you look at these are the Churchill crown that were issued in 1965, on his death. Probably one of the greatest men that's ever lived, as far as this country is concerned. So you can see how the coins are being rolled out for special occasions. Now, this was a silver wedding crown, and I picked up some of these in my early days of collecting. I picked up some of these, so you'll have to forgive some of the labels that are on here. But if you look, you can actually see, see what some of these are. And I've got loads of these, to be perfectly honest, I normally give them away to the kids as a lucky dip. And we've even got, who remembers Princess Di and Charles getting married, you see, the royal wedding. So these sort of things were given out at schools, and so there's often people will come up to me at a show and say to me, like, how much is this worth? And I say, well, unfortunately, not a lot, because there's just millions of them out there, literally millions. And then we move on to the modern day. In 1990, they introduced the £5 coin. Now, literally, the £5 coin was meant to supersede. It was meant to be the modern take on the crown. And so here we have one here, which is quite a good example. This is 2012, but it's in nice condition, and again, loads are made. Even up to the point where we now have £5 coins under Charles that are being made for 007. People collect these. I've just ended up with these. When I buy collections, often stuff is bundled in. I don't necessarily want it because I'm after something in particular within that collection. But 9 times out of 10, people will say, no, if you've got to buy my collection, you've got to buy the whole lot. You can't cherry pick. Which, to be fair, it's understandable. And this is how I end up with stuff like this, or stuff like this, when really this is what I'm after. I'm seriously considering doing a date run on crowns, because there is quite a few to collect, and I do like to collect. As we all know, I'm a massive fan of the Twinklies, and for me, having a date run, once I've done it, and then I'm on to another collection. So as I've just recently completed my Legendary Warriors, although the bugger's just bought out Attila the Hun, so now it's another one I've got to buy to keep the set complete. But at least I've got that set complete. So I'm thinking about doing either a date run on crowns or a date run on half crowns. Maybe you guys can tell me. Do you have any date runs that you guys do? Let me know in the comments. It'd be great to see down below what you guys collect, and whether we're all different or whether we're all the same. It's just interesting to know. Anyway, now that the £5 coin has taken over, these are the modern crown. So when you see these £5 coins, you know what they're referring to. They've taken over from these guys. So like everything, as the coins have modernised and things change, we have to change with it. Anyway, I'm not going to ramble on too much. I think I've done enough for today. Have a fantastic weekend. Have a fantastic Friday. And I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. If you haven't done so, please subscribe. Hit the button, the like button. Make sure that you tick the bell, ding-a-ling-a-ling, so that you know when I'm putting another video up. And also, drop in the comments, drop something down there that actually tells me what you'd like to see. If you've got a coins history that you'd like to know a little bit about, bang it in there. I'll be happy to oblige. Speak to you soon, guys. Take care now.